PBCJ, I am Simone Absalom. Debate on a bill entitled the Road Traffic Amendment Act 2018 will continue this week in the Upper House of Parliament. Debate on the bill, which seeks to impose harsher penalties and fines for breaches of the road code, was opened by Government Senate Leader Kamina Johnson-Smith on the floor of the Senate last Friday. Over 320 people died in motor vehicle crashes last year, with 140 young people among fatalities, a fact highlighted by Senator Johnson-Smith. She says the troubling trend has continued this year, and a variety of road users have been affected.
Mr. President, so far in 2018, the figures are alarming. The Ministry of Transportation's Road Safety Unit has indicated that 96 persons so far have died in 85 fatal crashes between January and April 23rd of this year. Most of these fatalities were pedestrians, motorcyclists, and drivers of private motor vehicles. Also included were private motor vehicle passengers, pedal cyclists, pillion drivers, PPV and commercial motor car passengers, PPP drivers, and one commercial motor car driver. And I name all of those categories just to make the point that everyone is affected by safety on our roads. Whether you are on foot, on 2 wheels, or 4, road safety is everyone's business. Hear, hear. These figures, Mr. President, are way too high, and they demonstrate the importance of road safety to us quite clearly. The cost, Mr. President, the cost to families, and the economic cost to our health sector and to our infrastructure, all too high.
Mrs. Johnson-Smith also argued that it's incumbent on legislators to play their part in attempting to restore discipline to the nation's streets.
So apart from the human and local imperative, we must do our part in reducing the number of road traffic crashes in Jamaica. So as we debate this bill, I urge us all to remember not only these figures, but the very human and harrowing experiences of persons losing loved ones in tragedies caused by unsafe road practices.
Senator Johnson-Smith says improved databases are being put in place to hold to account drivers who fail to pay their traffic tickets and do not attend court. She says when the new law is passed, drivers will not be able to renew certificates of fitness if they have outstanding tickets. Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clarke has announced that the Bank of Jamaica, BOJ, has retained the services of David Marston, who is a former senior advisor, deputy director and chief risk officer of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. Marston, a Jamaican, is currently a member of the Eminent Persons Group of G20 and is highly respected for his work advising central banks and governments around the world. Clarke, speaking at the Caribbean Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors in Montego Bay, St. James over the weekend, said the financial stability report produced by the BOJ stated that non-bank financial sector consisting of pension funds, insurance companies, security dealers, and collective investment schemes had assets of $1.7 trillion in 2017 and in assets is larger than the banking sector. In commenting on the retention of Marston's services, Clarke said Marston will support Governor Brian Winter in leading initiatives of a consultative process that, quote, will lead to actionable policy, legislative and reform initiatives to accelerate and deepen the role of finance and institutional capital in supporting inclusive growth while maintaining financial sector stability, which, of course, is paramount, end quote. Despite slower than expected economic growth, Prime Minister Andrew Holness says the government is implementing well-tried and well-studied policies that will achieve strong growth. While acknowledging that Jamaica is growing very slowly, he believes the country is on the right track. The Prime Minister was speaking at the closing ceremony for the 2-year pilot phase of the Development Bank of Jamaica Innovation Grant from New Ideas to Entrepreneurship, IGNITE project, and the launch of Phase 2 in New Kingston on the weekend. Lauding the DPG for implementing Ignite, which provides grant funding support for micro, small and medium-sized enterprises, the Prime Minister emphasized the importance of the government's instrumental approach to business development. The Prime Minister said it was incumbent on the government to support entrepreneurs in expanding their businesses, as also innovators and startups to create employment, an essential only in achieving growth. Britain has accepted the resignation of Home Secretary Amber Rudd amid countrywide outrage over authorities' mistreatment of long-term legal residents from the Caribbean. The resignation came hours after Rudd said she would stay in her job to ensure Britain's immigration policy is humane. But opposition politicians had demanded that she resign over what has become known as the Windrush scandal. The furor has grown since The Guardian newspaper reported that some people who came to the UK from the Caribbean in the decades after World War II had recently been refused medical care in Britain or threatened with deportation because they could not produce paperwork proving their right to reside in the country. An exciting new collection opened at the National Gallery this week, featuring whom some have described as one of Jamaica's greatest painters. Carol Francis was at the opening, and she filed this report.
Born in Westmoreland in 1891, John Dunkley is a self-taught artist. He is believed to be one of Jamaica's most important historical artists.
John Dunkley worked in Panama, Cuba, and Costa Rica before returning home to pursue a career as a barber on Princess Street in downtown Kingston. He is said to have decorated his shop with some of his paintings, which reportedly caught the eye of Hender Delves Molesworth, the then Secretary of the Institute of Jamaica. Mr. Molesworth encouraged him to take his art seriously.
Most of Dunkley's body of work are landscape which demand contemplation as they are set against a very dark background, seemingly filled with hidden symbolism.
I think that's really the most signature thing about Dunkley's work, and something I think everyone who's been drawn to it has really remarked on, this kind of the ambiguity, the mystery that's really contained in the images, which I think is quite metaphorical, because as you note, you see a lot, but there's so much that you feel is behind the image and so much symbolism. And he really worked with these. For instance, you'll see crabs repeated or spiders repeated, a kind of sun moon. He also does the same vegetation throughout many images. So you get this sense that he had a very honed, specific vocabulary of symbols and kind of icons that he worked with, but we, the viewer, are kind of left to unpack that. And I think that's one of the really beautiful things about the work, and one of the most important things about seeing it all together in one room is that you're allowed to kind of get a sense of this universe of visual imagery that he created, and this kind of beautiful, ambiguous space of emotion, of thought, of time that he created in these works.
Most of his work appears to have been done in the 1930s and 40s. The collection, which hangs in the National Gallery of Jamaica in downtown Kingston, consists of 48 paintings and several carved wood and stone sculptures. The exhibition also illustrates Dunkley's grasp of current affairs in the 1930s and 40s. This is evident in his portraits of the Right Honorable Sir Alexander Bustamante in The Good Shepherd, and U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt as he gazed at Portland Bight in 1940.
I'm just discovering John Dunkley, like most Jamaicans would. It is really amazing that someone who had no formal training but just raw talent could do such amazing work. As a politician, I can't help but paying close attention to the social commentary. So in a sense, he is also an historian, not just documenting great landscapes, but he's also making his own narrative of the social happenings of the time, you would note that he has a painting of Bustamante, who was a traveler himself. John Dunkley was a traveler, but he was painting Bustamante around the time of the labor riots. And so Bustamante is a hero leading a flock, and that's the painting, Bustamante with the sheep. So it was very moving to see that. But of course, you know, the viewer of the artwork can take whatever they wish. I'm just giving my own interpretation, and that's the provocative nature of art. It's not necessarily meant to communicate one idea, but to stimulate thought. And then, of course, there's another painting right here with Roosevelt, President Roosevelt of the United States, who visited Jamaica. And of course, now we have the considerations about Goat Island. Of course, Goat Island was a military base at one point in time. So Roosevelt visited the Portland Bight, where the Goat Islands were. And he painted this painting. Now, I can't say why he did it. But clearly, Roosevelt was a very important president in American history, ending of World War II. So, you know, his social commentary I found very interesting. But his capture of landscapes and giving a glimpse into life during that period of time, very interesting as well.
His wood carvings include the portrait of a man, hands clasped, bent in prayer, called Old Joe, and the carving from lignum vitae of a man seated, entitled Standy Gully. The exhibition at the National Gallery of Jamaica will be open to the public until July 29. Thereafter, the exhibition will move to New York in the United States.
In regional news, nearly 350 victims of human trafficking have been rescued by police in 13 Caribbean and Latin American countries. The Interpol-coordinated Operation Libertad saved men, women, and children trafficked abroad and forced into work. According to reports from the BBC, victims were found working in nightclubs, factories, markets, farms, and mines. Some worked in spaces no bigger than coffins. Officers arrested 22 people and seized cash, mobile phones, and computers. The coordinated raids were the result of a 2.5-year project funded by the Canadian government, which also trained specialist officers for the team. Police throughout the Caribbean were involved, including the Dutch islands of Aruba and Curacao, and the UK's Turks and Caicos Islands, as well as in Brazil and Venezuela. Operations were directed from Barbados and supported by Interpol command centers in Lyon, France, and Argentina's capital, Buenos Aires. In sports, Calabar High's Christopher Taylor and Kingston College's record-breaking long jumper Wayne Pinnock were on Saturday recognized for their excellence in the 124th Penn Relays Carnival in Franklin Field, Philadelphia. Taylor, who was part of 2 of Calabar High's 3 relay victories, was named High School Boys Athlete of the Meet for relay events, while Pinnock was named High School Boys Athlete of the Meet for individual events after he broke the event record in the long jump. Running all by himself after the Calabar team had opened up a commanding lead, Taylor anchored the record-breaking 4x400 meters relay team with 44.84 seconds, the fastest split ever at the relays for high school boys. Taylor also ran the second leg of the 4x100 meters relay that retained their title with 39.51 seconds, the second fastest ever. Pinnock confirmed his outstanding form all season with a 7.88 meter effort in the first round, breaking the record 7.69 meters set in 1994. The first year the event was contested by former Calabar High athlete Maurice Wignall. And that's the news. Thanks so much for making it PBCJ. Remember, we are the People's Station.